let's take 6 of the 16 professional steps and replace the 6 from the amateur broker process. This will help you understand why these two methods are incredibly different. The first step of the broker process is to decide to sell the company. The professional process says you can't do that. If you want the big stack of dollars, you can't decide to sell your company until you know what you're going to get paid for it, how you're going to be paid for it, and when you're going to be paid. You're going to make a lot of decisions in this professional process. You'll decide to start the process. You'll even decide to present it to buyers. But the decision to sell the company, it's the last step, not the first step, as in the amateur broker process. And as far as having an asking price or a get out number, we'll be learning about something called optimal buyers. The optimal buyer is different than the entrepreneurial buyer. For example, the optimal buyer tends to have resources and even a risk tolerance that the seller doesn't have. Therefore, the optimal buyer will plan to do things with the business that the seller was never going to do. And if I were your buyer and the business is going to be worth more to my board of directors than it is to you as the seller, what good would it do to give me a price for your business? You see, I know that when I'm an optimal buyer, I'm supposed to give an offering price to the seller. So in place of those 2 steps, I'll give you 2 different steps. Evaluation and decision. Notice, please, I said evaluation. I did not say valuation. And I make that point because most people who come to a generational conference are already familiar with the concept of valuation. You see, valuation is done for partner buyout purposes, for divorce purposes, for exit planning, succession planning, even tax planning purposes. Evaluation is only used for mergers and acquisitions purposes. What's the difference between the two? If I asked you to tell me the value of Apple Computer stock, would you give me the same response as if I asked you to evaluate Apple Computer as a potential investment? Of course not. Valuation is about the past. Evaluation is about the future. Now, the next step is to make a decision. But it's not the decision we talked about with the amateur process. It's not the decision to sell the business. Remember, the decision to sell will always be the very last step. The professional process is designed so you can start it years or even decades before you actually want to execute the transaction. And so all we're deciding at this point is, of the various paths I can take, making the business buyer ready, building value, etc., which one am I going to execute first? It is okay to find the buyer, then collect the documents when following the broker process, because the documents don't tell you who the buyer will be. That's why they call it the broker process. When you take off the R, what does it spell? Broke. See, in the professional process, we have to document first, because the documentation step will tell us what we are selling so we can then find the right buyers. And so you've got the document first. With the amateur process, you're going to document your past. You will be documenting your past with the professional process, but the primary thing you'll be documenting is that which you are selling to the buyer. Now, you may be thinking that you're selling your business, but that's not actually what the optimal buyer thinks they are buying from you. They are buying an opportunity to produce growth or synergy.